Black intelligentsia gorilla family.
Peace, family. Peace, family. This is Team Osiris, and we're gonna do something different today. I'm real excited about this one. This is my first time doing it with Brother Kansu, the aficionado, the president, the elder of Team Osiris, along with Melvin Jefferson, the grand archivist. And we're gonna be breaking down a gentleman by the name of Jashub, the Scholastic bully. We're going to be breaking down his presentation that he gave a couple of days ago about blacks being Jews, and we're going to be discussing some of the sources that he decided to use. I think it's very important that we go over these things because we're doing this so everybody can learn how to discern the information themselves, and that's what we want to show, and that's what we want to present, because there's no need to argue. There's no need for you or us to continuously be or become ignorant when dealing with these matters. Once again, as counsel was taught me, a debate is peer-to-peer. A debate is we are looking for primary research. That's what we are looking for. We're looking for primary research, primary sources. This is not a WWF shouting match. This is not about disrespect. This is not about making inflammatory remarks. This is about getting down to the scholastic business, and that's what we're here to do.
Well, you know what, Chris? No time is better than the present, man. Let's get it cracking.
Yes, sir.
Yep, yes, sir. I'm with it. Let's go. All right, so this is the first. We're looking at his presentation that he released on his channel the other day. And so this is one of the things we're just going through several points that stood out to us. And so the first one here is a slide where he's stating, again, black Jews can be identified by descent. Now, the source that he's using for that is the Jewish nation of the Caribbean, the Spanish, Portuguese Jewish settlements in the Caribbean and the Guyanas. This is a book by Mordechai Arbel, and he has the page number here, as well as a quote on the right. The quotation, he puts, "It is resolved that all Jewish mulattoes, blacks, mestizas, and casticas who carry the name of or are known to be descendant of the Portuguese Spanish nation will be considered congruent." Right? Any questions or any concerns about this slide?
First things first is when you see something like this, he's making an assertion here. Black Jews can be identified by descent. And the bullet statement, I'm assuming, is he's saying that it is resolved that all Jewish mulattoes, blacks, mestizas, and casticas who carry the name or are known to be descendant of the Portuguese Spanish nation will be considered congregation. That's a little vague, and I don't think that's enough information here to determine how black Jews can be identified. I mean, were they converts? Bloodline, descendants of Israel? Like I said, this is an assertion being made here. And, I think later on in this presentation and in this lesson right here, this slide, we're going to get the full context of what's being said here. Kansu?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is framing. When we look at the PowerPoint, it's all about citation and how to properly citate. To give citation to a source. We see that the source is the Jewish nation of the Caribbean, the Spanish, Portuguese, Jewish settlements in the Caribbean and the Guineas, right? We have the author's name along with the page number. Now, one would think that this citation is adequate just by looking at it. And then when we look to the right, we see that this is a bullet point that says it is resolved that all Jewish mulattoes, blacks, mestizos, and casticas who carry the name of, comma, or are known to be descendants of the Portuguese Spanish nation. Now, this has been put in bold, will be considered congregation. And so this is put in bold. So this is saying that I'm emphasizing this point within this stanza. And then it's finished with a period. So I want you guys to pay attention to it.
Next
All
slide.
right.
Yep.
Yep. So we're gonna look at the source here, and we're gonna also take a look at the quote and see if we can pull some more information from that. So on the next slide here, we have side by side the actual quote from the previous slide in its form, and then we also have on the right hand side in white the source here. Now, for those who can't see it, there is the quote here on the right, but again, I'll have to use the pointer here to show you that it's talking about this line here. So here it says, it is resolved that all Jewish mulattoes, blacks, mestizos, and castisas who carry the name of or are known to be descendants of the Portuguese Spanish nation will be considered congregation.
Or congregation. It's just another way of saying congregation. That's all.
Correct. Do you guys have any issues with this particular slide here?
No. One of the things that once again that he did in this slide was he parsed it and he did not give its full context. First of all, this seems like somewhat of a journal entry by, it says in 1787, and we'll see that on the next slide. But when you start it off, it says about the difference between a full member and a congregant, which means a member of their church or synagogue. And it says, it is resolved that all Jewish mulattoes, blacks, mestizos, casticas who carry the name of or are known to be descendant of the Portuguese Spanish nation will be considered congregating. All other Negroes, this is what it says, all other Negroes and mulatto Jews who want to join voluntarily in the Portuguese Jewish persuasion as congregant, I can't say that word for some odd reason, will be obliged to affirm this with their signature at the time of their acceptance. Once and for all, on all equal terms, they will enjoy all ecclesiastical privileges like other members of the nation. But nevertheless, on the understanding that the celebrations of their ceremonies, such as marriage and death, will take place in the synagogue in the afternoon rather than in the morning. Those who are truly married or are legitimate children may perform all the ceremonies during the weekdays and during the afternoon of the Sabbath and holidays. Now, what he seems, and I'm going to let Consul take it away when I'm done, and I want him to correct me if I'm wrong. He's asserting that this was speaking about race. Yes, it's speaking about race, but it's speaking about designation within a ecclesiastical setting. It's not talking about race or anything like that. It's just talking about your status in an ecclesiastical setting. So what is the gentleman, or what is trying to be inferred here? And it's very tricky, some of the things that can happen when you parse paragraphs or information from another book. It's important to read the full context, because when you start it at "it is resolved," that's a little weird, because "it is resolved" is not how this passage starts.
Right.
It starts about an ecclesiastical membership. That's what this is about. It's not about bloodline. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with identifying a bloodline. Go ahead, Consul.
Yeah, simple and plain is when you cite a source and you put the source as a apparent excerpt, and you start off with an excerpt from actually a full body of information, you change the scope. In the debate world, we call that shoehorning. You change the absolute scope to exactly what it means in totality. So when we look at the excerpt on the right from the actual book, it starts with about, capital A, about. But he goes into the tonnage of the excerpt and starts with it is resolved. So why would you take out about the difference between all full member and congruent? So the congruent, that means there's a difference between a full member and a congregation. Now, if you go back, Mel, to the previous slide, I want you to see it says Black Jews can be identified by descent. So now the term descent means that, okay, this is a genetical argument. We're talking about genealogy because the term descent is in the terminal field of genetics. And I don't mean modern genetics. I'm talking about genealogy, bloodline. So they are identified by bloodline. Now go back to the slide that we were on. And I'll say this quickly. When we look at this, it says, it is resolved that all Jewish matters, mulattoes, blacks, mestizos, so forth and so on, are known to be descendant of the Portuguese-Japanese nation and will be considered congregation. They're considered that, okay? But it does not say that it's imperative that they be black. What they're saying is about the difference between a full member and a congregant. A congregant is a partial member. When we go down to the bottom here of this passage, what supports what I'm talking about, those who are truly married or are legitimate children may perform all ceremonies during the weekdays and during the afternoon of the Sabbath and the holidays. Now we go back up and it says they will enjoy all ecclesiastical privileges like other members of the nation, but nevertheless, on the understanding that celebrations of their ceremonies, such as marriage and death, will take place in the synagogue in the afternoon rather than the morning. The natural practice is the morning, sunrise. It's not in the afternoon. So I want you guys to understand how this could shift the entire scope of this excerpt that was taken out. Because why would you just not put about the difference between a full member and a congregation? Why not put that in there? So this is what we talk about parsing, because he's saying that blacks, he didn't put the other people in. He didn't see, I want you to look at this caveat. He didn't realize what he excerpted. It said, it is resolved that all Jewish, not Judean, Jewish mulattoes, Jewish blacks, Jewish mestizos, Jewish Costicas. Just didn't say blacks. Now go back to the previous slide again now. Do you see Jewish black? He says Black Jews can be identified by descent. So we're talking about something now where he's parsing and changing the scope of the claim. He's basically summating it on his own. So just pay attention to the pathos as we go further.
All right. Yeah, I definitely concur. And I agree with both Christopher and Kaz, you had stated, and actually so does the author. If you go to the next slide here, and feel free to pause this as you will, but this talks about a plantation society in Suriname, and it discusses intermixing between Jewish masters and black slaves, preferably the black women. And so what happens is these Jewish mulatto children were educated by Jews, but they were not given the same birthright as a Jew who was, 100% Jewish. He could not have been a mulatto to be considered truly legitimate. And so the quote is stating that because of these illegitimate children, they can no longer require the same privileges as legitimate children or legitimate Jewish people. They have to do things differently. So this is where it talks about them having to affirm their persuasion as congregant with the signature when they're accepted. It also talks about, like Haikasi mentioned, when they take up the ceremonies like marriage or death, the synagogue for them is available in the afternoon instead of in the morning, where the legitimate ones have access to. So again, the context is that there is a difference between legitimate Jews versus illegitimate Jews. And those who are mulatto, black, mestizos, and caciques that are also Jewish are not considered legitimate. So this goes against the very same context of what Jashub was presenting in the previous slide, that again, black Jews can be identified by descent, because this is talking about a cultural norm and practice. Any questions about these slides?
Go ahead, Chris, because I want to identify something, but go ahead, Chris. You're on mute, Chris.
I want to read something real quick, because this is very important that we understand context once again. And when I see people parse things like that the way they do, it gives me the impression that you're trying to push a narrative. And it's the same thing when I used to read the Bible. I used to always tell people, you have to read the complete thought. You just can't take a certain verse and snatch it and pull it out of context. The gospel does that a lot. You're a scholar. You're supposed to be very scholastic, and we must learn how to read things in context. Let's look here, starting, go right here where it says, and the historian Goslings, right? Go to the page 107.
Okay.
And it says, and the historian Gosling, who specialized in the Dutch presence in the West Indies, wrote, this is what he wrote: the Jews were accused that they could not maintain discipline among their slaves. There's a difference right there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing is, if you're saying that you're a Jew, are you saying that you had African slaves? Because this does not sound like the curses here that's listed in your book. Now, I'm not trying to accuse you of everything, but context is key when reading these books. Let's continue on. When the slaves were idle, the falseness of these notions has been proven over and over again. Now, you see it says ... So where there were some other things that was written that we're not privy to in this passage, but I want to continue to read this. It says that the fact that the Bush Negro Rebellion started in regions that had no Jewish plantations, the existence of so many liberated slaves by Jewish owners, and the appearance of the so-called colored Jews, which we will deal with in the Pariambo, could prove that Jews were relatively more lenient to their slaves. In a plantation society like the one in Suriname, there was some intermixing between Jewish masters and black slaves. Abraham Bueno des Mesquita, Moses Horeb Brandon, and Samuel Hain de la Parra, in their letter to Governor Frederici on the 7th of March in 1794, state, several among the Portuguese nation out of private affection begot children with some of their female slaves or mulattoes. Out of particular love for Jewish religion, the boys were properly circumcised and the girls instructed by a teacher, as were their descendants. Some of these were manumitted at the request of their patrons, and others having them born out of wedlock. After the manumission, they were instructed by their mothers of whom they were born, and took the names of the Portuguese Jews. This is conversion. This is how we get the Jewish convert. This is the correct context to versus what was presented in your scholastic presentation here. I could do this all day with what you presented. And this book is called The Jewish Nation of the Caribbean. The Jewish nation of the Caribbean were those Jews that were expelled out of Spain. That was those were those Jews that were expelled, the Portuguese Jews. Go back to that slide for a minute. Go back to that slide. Now, if you read this closely, you should be asking yourself, I'm not understanding what it is he's saying, because it says are known to be descendant of the Portuguese Spanish nation, will be considered congregant or members of the congregation. It does not say members of Israel. It does not say members of the church. I'm sorry, members of a specific bloodline. It is talking about members of or descendant of the Portuguese Spanish nation through the intermixing between those Spanish Portuguese Jews and the African mothers or slaves that bore children to them. It's just that simple.
Yep. Something I'll say real quick before Kansu goes. Also, this talks about status, because here it says there's status in the Jewish community, and it's talking about these mulattoes or Black Jews. Their status in the Jewish community caused some ecclesiastical as well as communal problems. Most of the mulattoes of Jewish descent were offsprings of non-Jewish mothers, and according to the rules of Judaism, could not be considered Jewish.
Uh-oh.
Notwithstanding in the Jewish Savannah of Hashma in 1754, where Hashmoth is also the same person the quote came from, established rules by which mulattoes would be admitted as congregation versus members of the community, but not as Yehidim, full-fledged members. So showing a contrast, a clear contrast between the rights of full-fledged members in contrast with these Black Jews or these mulatto Jews. Go ahead, Counsel.
So when we see this and we see how the parse was done, it makes you wonder if it was intentional or not. I don't know, but it's given a strong inference. So to parse this way, without saying about the difference. So when we look at the very top, the 1787 Hashmoth made it even clearer, semicolon. So that means that this sentence, and go back to the page you just left, Mel, that means that sentence before the word about was alluding to what you read prior to about the Jewish surname and the Hashmaka and them being Yahadim. That was a continuation of that. But he didn't, not only did he admit that, he admit about the difference between. Now this paragraph needed to be given in its entirety to say that it was a distinct difference. And if as we read all the way through, there were different privileges. So now as I've read this, since we didn't read the book, we go to the top left of the same page and it says Jewish masters. So now if we know the culture of Judean culture, we know that you are who your father is. You're not who supposedly your mother is. But this is the contradiction here. If you are who your father is, according to this, to the publicized doctrine that you purport, then that means you guys would be children of slave masters, and you are the slave master. You're actually not the African that was enslaved. You're not the Black, you're not the mulatto, you're descendants of Jewish slave masters. Not because you are who your father was, who mixed with Black slaves. They didn't mix with men, they mixed with women. That's how the Hashmoth was created. So this gives direct conflict to the implication and inference that was put on this slide.
Yep. And I'm gonna piggyback Kansu one last time because I want to read something here so we don't play with that word Darkei Yeshraim or Yeshraim. And the Darkei Yeshraim, it simply means the way of the righteous. I want to read something. It says the mixed race Jewish citizens of Paramaribo struggled to define themselves and to defend their rights to be recognized by fellow Jews. This is in a book called The Ways of Peace by, what's his name here? Rabbi Eshkol, I can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry. It says white Jews helped found the synagogue on the condition that Siva or brotherhood not form their own separate sect. The members of the Darkei Yeshraim responded by arguing if they could not be recognized as an independent community, then they should be accepted as full members of a larger Jewish community. In 1794, a letter from Governor Frederici ordered mixed-race Jews to, quote, subordinate themselves to the rules of the Portuguese Jewish authority, effectively ending the community at Darkei Yeshraim. Over time, however, mixed-race Jews gained acceptance as fully fledged members of the mainstream community, first unofficially and then by formal decree. By 1856, the governing body ordered community leaders to accept the children of enslaved converts as Jews. I'm gonna get this. So this was speaking about ecclesiastical membership. I don't know what else to say. It's called context. I guess we can go to the next slide.
All right. So the next slide here, again, Jashub, his slide here states that white does not always denote skin color. That is a statement here. His source here is Portuguese Style and Luso-African Identity, Pre-Colonial Senegambia, 16th, 19th centuries, and it's written by Peter A. Mark. These here are page numbers, and his quote from the source states, "A century after Jobson, Francis Moore's 1732 observation confirms the association of social status with the terms white, quote, and because all who are free claim this title." There's another quote there for some reason. 94, there must be a footnote. From the late 16th to the 19th century, one perceives a consistent system of ascribed meaning, whereby white implies both social status, slave trader or free man, and references to cultural and blood ties to Portugal.
Now, I want to say this really quick, and then I know Chris is going to take this. I know Chris is ready to crush this. When you say a term and you quote it, air quote or quote, that means that it's a layman term, not necessarily a definitive one.
Right.
So whereby white implies. That's why you have grammar to understand the diction of what's being written. It's not affirming white. It's just saying this was a general colloquial term, white. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
And your assertion does not necessarily, your assertion actually contradicts what you put here. Because you said white does not always denote skin color, but this is what it reads towards the end. It says, from the late 16th to the 19th century, one perceives a consistent system of ascribing meaning whereby white implies both social status and references to cultural and blood ties to Portugal. So yes, it does denote skin color, but we need to find out what this is denoting, what this passage is truly talking about here, because we're going to see something. How can I say it without being inflammatory? We're going to see we're going to see a pattern here that's being produced with his narrative here.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So here on the next slide is the quote below that we had just read. And then above on the left here is the actual quote. So I'm going to actually show you guys exactly where that quote is to make it easy. So it says, after a century after Jobson, Francis Moore's 1732 observation confirms the association of social status with the terms white and black.
Pause. Where's black at in his presentation?
So you see the term white and because.
But he took out the word black.
Why?
Why?
Uh-oh.
Don't tell me you were copying and pasting and forgot to put the word black in there.
That would have changed the whole premise. Would have changed your assertion immediately.
Exactly. So I said it contradicts itself. Keep going.
Okay. And also there's a period here. So when I'm looking for the word because does not show up until the very next sentence. So this section here, and in 1818 at the Luso-African trading community of Giba in present-day Guinea-Bissau, Gaspard Molin observed blacks and mulattoes who are nevertheless called white because. So all of that is missing as well.
So,
But
so hold on,
because
hold on. So he took that out. Is that what you're telling us?
I don't see it here. Let me go back to the previous page. Maybe I'm missing something. No. I don't see it there either.
Okay, so now we have some forgery going on.
Yep, looks like something's either intentionally missing from here to either make a point that the original author isn't making, but it's crystal clear that it was, something missing because of black being missing in the actual text, and then the fact that the entire beginning of a sentence is missing as well.
Paul Gassard Moline observed blacks and mulattoes who are nevertheless called white. Now, here's the thing. Why would I take that out if I was a Hebrew? Well, I got to prove that I'm under the curses. Right here, you ain't seeing no curses. You seeing them being called white because they're free. So I have to remove that in order to push a narrative. That's what it looks like when you take that type of information out. That's why I say context is key. Go back to the last slide for a minute. Now it says white does not always denote skin color. You're right, but what are you trying to push here, Kansu? What is he trying to push? Because we see a social status being spoken of here.
Correct.
Yes, what I see, the pattern that I see, Chris, is I see a genetic fallacy. I see that you started out with descent, now you're going into phenotype because you're focusing on skin color. You went from descendancy, which is blood transference, heritage, which is descendancy from ancestry, right? And now you're going into the phenotypical skin color to justify a congregation, not a lifestyle, being a member of the church of some ethnic people. So Melvin, go to the next slide just for a second. I want to show something that's very critical when it comes to citing. And this is why we focus on scholarship. When we go to the top here, what was omitted, right? We see that the term from, where it says from,
down by 94.
Yes. A free claim to this title, right?
Yeah, on his side. Yeah, from here.
Now, we don't see 94 in this book anywhere. We don't see the quote. Where did that come from?
It's right there. It's right there.
Right,
it's right
here.
there.
94 is a footnote. Usually,
footnote.
Right.
So that means that if it's a footnote, it needs to be cited because the footnote gives scope to the actual quote.
Correct. But usually, whenever I see a number like that doesn't pertain to the actual discussion, like it's not a year, it's not referencing a page number or an age or something relevant, it just stands out like that, that lets me know that was a copy and paste job.
Oh yeah, well I know the methodology. We know it's copy and paste.
Yeah,
that's why he took the stuff out.
Yeah,
exactly.
And another thing that we see is we see 95 at the bottom. Generally, what these are web books. You went to the web and you copy and paste it. That's why you see 94 in a book. It's done by stanzas. You'll see 94, 95, 96. A lot of books that I have on the on internet. You'll see that a lot. But our gripe is, once again, is the narrative that you're pushing, bro, young man, because the narrative that's being pushed here is, as Kansu say, genealogy now. But this was never talking about genealogy. Once again, this is talking about social status. But you took out the word black because you also see that blacks were called whites for social status.
Correct.
You understand what I'm saying? That's what this was talking about. This has nothing to do with genealogy. So once again, you misparsed some critical information. As a matter of fact, that blacks and mulattoes who are nevertheless called white, because all who are free claim this title, right? That's very important. You didn't even put that in your presentation, sir. You didn't even put that there. You didn't even cite it. As a matter of fact, you took out the word black. You took it out. that's sort of disingenuous because, you know, I'm being called names and all I said is we're going to do a presentation. And I can say a lot of things, but this is dishonesty. This is dishonest scholarship. Let's go to the next, don't go to the next slide. Let's go over here to Portuguese style and Luso-African identity.
So at the bottom here is where this actual quote is from here. But if you look at right above it, there's some clarity given about the social status.
There you go.
So it says, the origins of the Luso-Africans' use of white and black may be traced to the 16th century. Almeida uses the term black to refer to Africans and white to refer to Portuguese and Cape Verdeans. His use of the term likely reflects attitudes about color prevalent in the late 16th century Portugal. At the same time, however, Almeida's terminology does not follow a simple binary oppositional model, and it transforms the pre-existing Iberian terminology. Already in the 16th century, the society of Cape Verdeans was widely intermarried, and Almeida himself was apparently a mulatto. Nevertheless, he places himself in the category white, that his family belongs to the island elite, and that they own slaves, suggesting that white and black referred not to skin color, but at least in part to social class. So it's giving clarity here, and it's adding another confirmation for Francis Moore's 1732 observation. So it's just confirming what was already spoken above. And here it even talks about how Jobson calls black Negroes. So there's context being given that if you would have added that context, that would have also helped. Go ahead, Chris.
All right. Yeah, I was going to read that, but I think you've already read it. Once again, it gives let the book explain itself.
Correct.
We don't have to do the exegesis, eisegesis thing and trying to create narratives that don't exist. That is called shoehorning, as Kansu has said. Once again, I'm not saying you did it deliberately, but we're seeing this pattern here. We're seeing this pattern here with your presentation. You know, I could not do something like this, let alone sleep at night, or let alone let my peers look at it. There's no way I could present this to my peers and say, here, look, because first of all, they'll catch this and they'll say, what is this? You know, so I think we've explained all that, unless Brother Constable got something he want to say.
No, I'm good.
All right. So we'll go to the next one. So here's another slide here from Jashub. He says genealogy backs the claim of Sephardic Jews.
There's the assertion.
Now there's the assertion, and you guys see the trend: genealogy, skin color, descendancy. We're looking at it. We're looking at the formation of argument around genetics. Okay, everything is denoting phenotype, genealogy, and bloodline. I want you guys to watch the theme of how these assertions are made.
Right. All right. So genealogy backs the claim of Sephardic Jews. The source is the same source we just looked at earlier. The Jewish nation of the Caribbean, the Spanish Portuguese Jewish settlements in the Caribbean and the Guyanas by Mordechai R. Bell again. And there's the page number. And the quotation is here. It says, the colored Jews formed the Brotherhood of Mulatto Jews in 1779 called Darhi Yesharim, and began their struggle for complete acceptance into the Jewish community. Success came very gradually, only after proving that they were descendants of Spanish Portuguese Jews. Now, do you remember Chris breaking down who the Darhi Yesharim were earlier? Do you guys have any questions or comments about the slide?
No, I think I addressed this right here. Once
Correct.
again, his slides once again are contending with each other. They're just contending with each other. There's no synthesization with this information. It just seems like it's all been put together to push a narrative. I'm gonna show Jew, I'm gonna show black, I'm gonna keep it very vague so your imagination can go to work, because we know through the process of indoctrination, when you're being given a belief, certain ideas would begin to creep in your head. But see, what we're doing here is we're tearing down the cognitive barrier, and we're giving you guys the information that's presented on these pages versus certain paragraphs being parsed and pulled out and presented them in front of you. This is 2010 stuff right here that has already been dealt with. You know, I know the difference. I know who the Spanish Portuguese were. I mean, it's a shame that we all don't know. You know, as a matter of fact, as I showed before on this one slide, and I will be doing a historical presentation surrounding these events from the 16th all the way to the 18th century, with the Sephardic Jews and slavery. I'll be doing that later on my channel, because it's very important that we understand the context, that we understand the history, and that we are being given a time frame here. This is what's not being given here. It seems like there's a doctrine trying to be pushed here. Kansu?
Oh no, I mean, you've already reiterated this, so I don't even have to. We don't have to expound. We clearly see a degenerative pattern. We see a pattern of confirmation bias, and we also see a pattern of plagiarism because the quotes are parsed, and there really isn't any purpose to parse if you're speaking in an affirmation. You're saying what this genealogy backs the claim of Sephardic Jews. You're not saying intermixing of genealogies backs the claim of Sephardic Jews. You're just saying genealogy as if it was a natural process of ancestor to descendant or parent to child, when that's not the case.
Right. Okay. So let's go and look at the source. So the quote from Jashub is on the top, and the actual quote from the source here is on the left. So the quote starts right here. The colored Jews formed a brotherhood of mulatto Jews in 1779 called Darhi Yasharim, the way of the righteous, and began their struggle for complete acceptance into the Jewish community. Success came very gradually, only after proving that they were descendants of Spanish Portuguese Jews. Now, there's more to this sentence that was cut off. Let me see if that's available on the previous slide. No, it's not. And there isn't even a period there. But the rest of the sentence says, and had married a member of the Jewish community. So not only were they descendants of Spanish,
Melvin. It's over here on the next page over here.
Right, it's over here as well. This is the full page, but I cropped out this part here so people can see it. But yes, they were not only descendants of Spanish Portuguese Jews, but they also married a member of the Jewish community. So I'm not sure why he left out why they married a member of the Jewish community, but if you're gonna quote, I would definitely add that back in.
So now, and if you guys remember what we said earlier, we just didn't make an assumption. We read this. We didn't make an assumption that the intermixing were just slaves. We told you they were females. So if we go up, Neil, the paragraph before on the right, we go all the way up to where it says several Portuguese. Let's go up to an interesting phenomenon. That means this isn't normal. An interesting phenomenon was the colored Jewish community in Paramimbo, Suriname. So we got to see the chapter on the Surinamese. But when we go down, it says several Portuguese Jews sired children with female slaves. Now, remember, we talked about this earlier, and this is where it's starting to show inference of fraudulent activity. It clearly denotes African slaves. The only way you could have done that is with the females. So that means that if the law is you are who your father is, guess what? You are a slave trader. You are part of the slave community then, which violates your covenant as a Hebrew Israelite. So then when we go here, it says the Jewish masters, once again, in most cases, liberated and educated these children as Jews. They liberated them and then educated them on the organic culture. and traded them as family members. That's big, because in Western Africa, in continental areas, chattel slavery was not being implemented then. These were slaves of the family.
No, this
They were
is treated.
annexed in.
Constantly,
It treated them
treated
as
like
family members. I'm sorry, Mel.
Yeah, it says treated, not traded. Treated.
Right. No, what I'm saying is that the reason why I said traded. The reason why I said traded is because there's inference of a slave trade.
Right.
The slave trade was, we're going to trade you from your African origin and you're going to be adopted into the Jewish origin. You are going to be a vassal. We're going to vacillate you. All right, that's the proper terminology. Because they treated them as family members, in some case, they could inherit the plantation. They traded their culture in for a new culture that they were inherited by siring, breeding. They were bred, just like a dog breeds with another dog.
Right,
just like that.
Giving birth, correct.
They were not considered organic to the point they couldn't even have synagogue with the continental Jew.
Correct.
No, you do yours in the afternoon. We're doing ours in the morning. So we see this context here, and we understand it. And so by the time we get down to where the quote starts, right? The colored Jews formed a brotherhood, so forth and so on, right? When we read at the very beginning, that was again left out. These Jewish mulattoes were accepted into the synagogue, but only became full-fledged members when their desire to be Jews proved to be serious. That was intentionally left out. Why? These blacks that you're talking about genealogy, they had to prove their allegiance. So it wasn't a genealogy association. It wasn't nothing genetically associated by these guys. They had to be proven their fortitude to their alliance as a member because their mother was African.
So that tells me because it says here when their desire proved to be serious. So that tells me a lot of them were not seriously interested in becoming Jews or being accepted into the synagogue. That means that their mother probably still taught them their traditional beliefs. Because there's no way you could say that they were not serious if they accepted their father's, the slave masters' beliefs and culture. So the only way to say that they were accepted is to say, okay, they're serious about becoming a Jew, and so we're going to accept them in the synagogue.
Exactly, because these Jews were following the laws. They were following mitzvah. These children cannot be who we are because they come from African mothers.
Correct.
So because there was a social unrest that was talked about in the previous slide, that was intentionally left out. It was a social issue. Therefore, we're going to have to settle this by them giving allegiance to the fact that they would be Jews. So I want everyone to understand that this was considered a phenomenon. This means it was an anomaly. It wasn't something that was generally done. It was a provision. Okay, it was an interesting phenomenon. This is from the same source that Jashub used. But Jashub's premise is we don't read the book. Okay.
Cool.
Apparently you didn't either.
And I want to bring something else up because one of the things, so he doesn't try to move the goalposts. It says, well, who are these Jews being discriminated against? Let's read. It says, in Jamaica, the Jews were discriminated against until the beginning of the 19th century, with one result being their dispersal in small townships and villages. Trying their best to make a living, Christian businessmen accused Jews of underhanded dealings with slaves.
Ooh.
Creoles claimed that Jews sold their goods to slaves at night. And when the slaves held their markets on Sundays, it was said that Jews bargained with the slaves while the rest of the populace was in church. Jews were further accused of selling ammunition and guns to slaves.
Wow.
So it was not surprising when a black rebel who was captured in Savannah, Lamar, Jamaica, said to a Jewish soldier guarding him, quote, "You and us are the same. You are different from the whites and they hate you. Let's join forces." You have an African slave who was converted to a Jew speaking to a mulatto because the white Christian communities don't like either one of them. The Jews who hold on to their synagogue teachings, their halakha, their Mishnah, their Torah, versus the Christian Protestants, Kansu, tell me if I'm wrong, who only tell them to live by the gospel and hold on to the Hermetic hypothesis and believe that niggas should be enslaved. I mean, come on.
Woof. That's killer right there.
You left all that out, though.
You left all that out, though.
Oh, that's out. You didn't show that.
But yet, when I say we're going to do a presentation on the information that you presented, because I don't feel as if you read this information correctly, you got incensed by it. But now we know why. We're just showing where you need to better yourself at, bro. That's it. Next slide.
All right.
Sorry, did you want to add on to that?
Oh no, come on, man. No, that's checkmate.
Okay.
Right now, the person is on the ropes and we just beating them up on the ropes right now.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay.
All right. I want to go to the next slide. So the next slide, again, Jashub says here, the phenotype of the original Jewish population.
Okay, stop right there. Once again, this is another assertion being made here. Go ahead.
Correct. And again, it goes back to what Kansu said. He's talking about genealogy. If you connect them all, talks about phenotype, color, race. So it goes into a genetic debate.
And let me say this too. When someone reiterates what they already reiterated, that's called begging the question. You just said white and skin color. Now you go to phenotype. That's phenotype is skin color. So now you're begging the question. That's what that's called.
These can be anecdotal talking points. You could have just used this as anecdotal talking points, man.
Right. All right. So his source here for this claim is the Jew, a Negro, being a study of the Jewish ancestry from an impartial standpoint. This is by Arthur Talmadge Abernathy. It's a page number. And the quote is here: "The original Jews were, therefore, short, dark people of the long-headed type. The original Jew and Negro were then descended from the same father."
Pause. Now remember, his assertion here is the phenotype of the original Jewish population. This is his assertion concerning the matter that is in this book. Go ahead.
All right. Kansi, did you have any questions?
No.
Well,
no, sir.
All right. So here we have the quote from Jashub, and then the quote is here at the bottom. Also, it's over here on the right, but I'm going to exactly read the quote. So the beginning of the quote is: "The original Jews were therefore short, dark people of the long-headed type. The original Jew and Negro were then descended from the same father." The interesting thing about this quote is that it comes from two separate sentences, two separate paragraphs, actually. And the context for them are going to be different because of what's being discussed. The second sentence is more so talking about intermarriage between Jews and Negroes. So this is why it's saying they're the same father. But the previous sentence is talking about them having a certain head type. Now, if you read this book, again, this is the preface of the book, but if you read this book, in the previous page, it talks about the comparisons between head types and head sizes. It goes over broad head types and broad sizes compared to long head sizes. And as you can see above, it talks about nose shapes. And then here it says broad heads in Europe are all intuitive from Asia. So it goes into head types, which is really craniometry, but it goes into that here. Let me go back. So it goes into that here. So My question here would be why take two separate sentences from two separate paragraphs when each paragraph has specific context to that sentence? And again, if you can't see it here on the right, it is here at the bottom left. Any questions or comments?
Yes, let me say something really quick. When we look at how a book is edited and how it's written, how it's typecast, what Melvin is talking about is critical. The end of the previous paragraph was parsed into the beginning of another one, which totally changes the precept. When we look at the excerpt of the quote, it's two different paragraphs.
Correct.
It's not a whole thought. When you're writing with grammatical law, when a paragraph ends and you begin another one, that means that you're coming on, it's a different thought process.
Correct.
Or it would have been one whole paragraph. It distinctly was two different ones, which Melvin is talking about contextual context. This is inference of intent to beg a question and an appeal from ignorance. Go ahead.
Chris, did you have any comments? Or?
Yeah, I want you to go. I want to continue to harbor on. I'm gonna point this out again because so people can understand what happened. He go to where it says the original Jews. It says the original Jews were therefore short, dark people of the long-headed type. Pause. To put that as an example or as an answer to your assertion, you have to read. This is your assertion, the phenotype of the original Jewish population. But the entire phenotype in this book and on this page in a preface, by the way, fucking preface of all things, it's before you get there, you have to read all of this.
Correct.
It's telling you, this is what it says. In Africa, let me start here. The head shape is identical or nearly so. From the Negro to the Scandinavian, and there is perfect gradation of complexion and other characters. From the little black broad-nosed Negro to the big white narrow-nosed Scandinavian. The broadheads in Europe are all intruders from Asia. I do not agree with him that, agree with who? Okay, let's continue on. That this race, the Euro-African, arose in Africa and spread north. But the opposite is the truth, period. Nor do I agree with him, who's him once again. See, so much of the context in the preface has been excluded. Nor do I agree with him that the original Aryans were the broad-headed Asiatic invaders. The weight of the evidence is to the effect that the original Aryan was the blonde part of this Euro-African race, which was cooped up in the north. The original Semites were those which spread around the Mediterranean, probably on the northern and eastern shores. The Hamites were then an early offshoot in Africa. It is but a step from the Berber and Egyptian to the Sudanese, and from these to the true Negro. All these types are the first cousins from Scandinavia. All these types are the first, all the way to the Congo. Now, here's the conclusion of everything I just read. Correct. The original Jews were, therefore, short, dark people of the long-headed type. The original Jew and Negro were then descended from the same father. The evidence of intermarriage you mentioned, who is this him again, is a universal phenomenon in the close affinity between Hamitic and Semitic speech and between the northern Hamitic people and the Semites shows a close relationship as you surmise. So in this preface, we don't even know who this him is because you did not give proper context to what is being said here. This doesn't prove anything. And what year was this book written? What's the name of this book?
The book is called The Jew, a Negro being a study of the Jewish ancestry from an impartial standpoint.
The Jew, a Negro, a study. I want to get
a study of the Jewish ancestry. So first of all, you know the book is dated because it's using biblical.
This book is 1910.
Correct. But the reason why, here's how I know the book is dated. First of all, it's using terms like Negro, it's using biblical terms. such as Semites and Hamites, but it's also saying, that they're connected to some Scandinavians. So this is a dated book, and whoever the preface is written by, because a lot of times the preface can be written by the author, but there are times where the preface is not written by the author. And so whoever the preface is written by, this is their assertion on the claim that's being made from the author, and it's just dated. So I would never use this in a modern discussion about genetics or even phenotype, because it's completely outdated. And I would never use that to express what a particular person ethnic background is like, especially when it talks about head shape. That's completely outdated.
Well, one thing that Chris brought to light, and I want to reiterate what Chris stated, we don't even know who him is.
Correct.
So that lets me know that this is an argumentative commentary. This is not
Commentary,
a discovery or claim to fact. This person is saying that I believe this juxtaposed to him. Him believes this, I believe this. It's a summation, as he said at the end of the paragraph. This is
Correct.
a summation. This isn't a fact, hasn't been validated. It's context clues. So it's all about the prose. And again, it's awfully strange that this is two paragraphs parsed at the ending of one and the beginning of the other that have two different contextual meanings.
You cannot do that. If you were in college, in an English course, in any science course, and you were doing a dissertation, a hypothesis, you fail. And you're probably kicked out of the university for doing something like this.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. So I'm going to go to the next slide.
Yep.
So here's another claim being made. Effacing history in favor of hyphenated whiteness. Effacing means erasing, if you will, whitewashing history in favor of hyphenated whiteness. The source here is Jews and Blacks in the Early Modern World, written by Jonathan Scorch. Here's the page number. And the quote is, "The history of the colored Jews born of transracial sex and their congregation underwent almost complete erasure from the authors." You guys have any comments on that?
Chris could go ahead.
Once again, you guys see the pattern going on here with this. He's creating a narrative by constantly highlighting what he wants to be highlighted. He hasn't shown me the ability to synchronize the information correctly. It's fraudulent. I have to call it like I see it now. You know, the Torah says by the testimony of two witnesses. We've had three. We've had three now. You parsing verses, the end of one paragraph and then the beginning of another, convoluting the context between the two. You're constantly doing this. And I gotta start to, I'm not saying you're a bad person, but I'm saying I gotta begin to question your integrity on your integrity when dealing with scholarship. Let's go to the next one. Let's go.
All right, Kasi, do you have any comments on that?
No.
Okay, so we'll go to the next one here. So here's the quote from Jashub here, and then the actual place where the quote is from is down here. I'm going to read it on the right, but if you can't see it on the right, it's down here at the bottom. It actually starts with right here, the history of the colored Jews. But I'm going to do it on the right. So the history of the colored Jews born of Sephardic transracial sex.
Okay,
Now,
pause.
Because
Go ahead, Constance. Go ahead.
You see Sephardic to the left?
Uh-huh.
I do not see Sephardic here.
How could you miss one word?
Exactly.
Continue, brother.
Let me go back on the previous slide. Did I miss that?
It's
Okay,
fraudulent.
no. I don't see Sephardic here either.
It's fraudulent.
Yeah, so that's a big misstep there. So born of Sephardic transracial sex, and their congregation underwent almost complete erasure, but from the authors. But here there's a comma. He added a period here.
Why would you put a
His-
period instead of a comma, or at least 3 dots to show excerpt?
Correct, because here's a period as well. Because the author has a comma and they say Jewish mulattoes receiving barely a mention in passing. Another issue I have with this quote is that it starts in the middle of a sentence. This is a comma here, not a period, and the punctuation for the in the history of the colored Jews is not capitalized. The sentence actually begins with finally, particularly significant in terms of the construction of the Sephardic whiteness in Suriname. Then the quote begins. And actually, if you really want the context for this passage, you would need to start with the beginning of the paragraph, where it talks about the religious tolerance conveyed by the narrative master a social system. This is what we're talking
Grounded in
about. Exploitation of those with darker skin and suppression of their religious culture. And so it talks about this Sephardic whiteness in Suriname as a contrast to their culture, but then it also goes into the history of these colored Jews who are Sephardic, that have Sephardic transracial sex, and then it goes into their congregation almost being erased by authors. So it's even saying that these mulattoes that are Jews barely receive a mention in passing by these same authors. So it's a lot missing from this quote up here that, again, his point he's making is saying that there's a erasing of history, or effacing of history in favor of hyphenated whiteness. Did you guys have any comments about this here?
Yeah. Once again, we're going back into the Darkei Yasharim.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the slaves who became Jews, who wanted to have the same ecclesiastical rights as the original Jews. We see that's what's going on here. Go back to his assertion here. His assertion, what he's claiming is that they wiped out the black Jews. They got rid of all the black Jews. Go back to the quote again. Let's go back to the quote that he fraudulently took words out of again.
Correct. So you would start with finally,
particularly significant in the terms of the construction of Sephardic whiteness in Suriname, the history of the colored Jews born of Sephardic transracial sex. What were we talking about earlier? We were talking about the men who had sex with the African slaves, and their congregation underwent almost complete erasure from authors. Jewish mulattoes receiving barely a mention in passing. Now we know Jewish mulattoes were people of mixed descendancy.
correct.
That ain't talking about the original Jews or that's what this is talking about. That's a shoehorn. And your assertion is incorrect based on what's being presented here.
Correct. And saying that it's erasing their history because of whiteness is not correct, because again, it's talking about a social system that's based on the exploitation of those with the darkest skin and suppression of their culture, of their religious culture. So I think, again, if you really want the context of the quote, you should get the entire paragraph in which the quote is actually in, so that you can understand what it's talking about. But again, because he grabbed this quote from the middle of a sentence and also took out the word Sephardic, it's very disingenuous. It shows that, like, if you're going to copy and paste, you would never miss that word Sephardic. That word is in there. So that means it was intentionally taken out. Constance, did you have any comments?
No, sir.
All right. I'm going to go on to the next slide here. Okay.
Hell, I didn't see that when we were when we were putting that together. I didn't see that.
Yeah, you gotta have an eye for those things. Again, you gotta have a book to see that, you know. So if you got the book, you can easily see that. So next is the next claim he's making is irrefutable data on the classification of the Jews.
No,
And
pay attention to the word irrefutable.
yeah, that's a big
In
statement.
an assertion. Just pay attention to that. Go ahead now.
Yep. All right. And then the source is the Sephardic Atlantic, Colonial Histories and Post-Colonial Perspectives. This is by Sina Rauschenbach and Jonathan Scorch. There's the page number there. And the quote is, early modern Jews were not automatically white, but they were easily counted among black people. There's that white again and black again. So we'll see where this goes. You guys have any comments on this particular page?
Let's see. It says early modern Jews were not automatically white, but they were easily counted among black people. Well, it goes right back to a couple of slides ago where you had a slave rebellion and they were telling the mulatto Jew that you're not accepted amongst the whites because of their religious practices, because of their intermixing, their fathers intermixing with slaves. The slave would recognize that. You know what I'm saying? So yes, they were easily counted amongst the black people, but of course their social designation would be considered white because they were in fact free. But of course, a Christian Protestant or Catholic is going to look at them like, oh, you don't worship the gospel.
Nope.
So therefore, you're like the black people here as far as religious rights, so on and so on. These were the things that was going on. This is why they were expelled out of Spain. Let's just go to the next one to see here. You know, irrefutable data. Irrefutable, guys.
All right. So here is Jashub's quote here at the bottom in orange. It's in orange. And then at the top is the actual quote where he got it from. I'm going to show the actual page in a second, but I definitely want to do this first, this comparison. So here it's a quotation, actually, and it says early modern Jews. So first of all, he has it capitalized, but we'll continue. Early modern Jews were not automatically white. And it's an end quote. But, and again, just for punctuation, he has that capitalized.
He put a period there.
He did, and he also capitalized it. But they were easily counted among black people. Now, there's a comma here. He doesn't have a period, but he's missing the context for the quote.
Didn't finish.
Or they were at least considered to be of a special white but Jewish, in quotation, status. So this is talking about
now, and I want to say this critically when it comes to reading comprehension. This is called critical reading, everyone. Do you see that the quote, early modern Jews were not automatically white, end quote. This author wants to have integrity. So what did he do? He put an annotated footnote, number 55, in a possible bibliography to give scope to that quote.
And
so that he's not being disingenuous in his research.
And to back you up, Kansu, the beginning of the sentence doesn't start here.
No.
It actually starts as Jonathan Scorch has convincingly argued. So it's likely that this number 55 references a Jonathan Scorch writing, whether it's another book or article or something. So again, the context of that sentence is very important.
And let me clarify this, guys. It's called cognition. What validates is the preface that we had showed earlier. The word him. So obviously Mr. Source is arguing a him, whoever that him is that was left out. If we go early on in the preface, if we start from the beginning, we'll see that this is a commentative argument. And it's why footnotes are added. Because he's not claiming to have facts. He's claiming to justify an argument that is still open. The same argument, white but Jewish, which was left out, has a footnote as well, 56. So it shows a pattern of this particular author that is letting everyone know that this is my opinion based on my general research. This isn't a fact. This is not should be used as a reference point for primary, rendering this second to tertiary evidence.
All right.
I wanna get back into it, and once again, this is speaking about social designation. This is social designation. This is not talking about race. This is a social designation. And because he did not cite this properly, his source properly, we get a lot of missing context here. This is why I said on the Garfield Reed platform, some of the things that he used to prove a point or convey his message, let me know that he did not read these books in its proper context. Reading comprehension, context, understanding what's being said, understand why it's written are keys. Remember, his assertion was it was irrefutable. Well, if it's irrefutable, why did you take words out? Why did you take punctuations out? Why did you deface the scholarship on here to convey a message? This is fraudulent. And as a listener to YouTube or Black YouTube or the scholarship that's on YouTube, I have a right to be upset at this point. This is what I'm sitting up there saying. We call each other names. You slandered me on Garfield. Excuse me. You did all of this, but yet you do it to yourself. You bear witness to yourself. These are the things you're doing, and we're just pointing them out in your presentation, man. That's it.
Right. We're seeing a pattern here that is unavoidable to miss.
Right.
I'm going to go to the next few slides. There's a few slides here, but the reason why I have them is because I want to add context here. So it talks about, this is all prior to the actual quote. So the quote comes here. This is where the quote comes on 173 in the book. But the pages prior to that have some context. So here it talks about the situation of the colony, and this is the colonies in Spanish America. So Nassie's Essai Historique, Nassie is who they're talking about. Nassie talks about some things regarding the Surinamese Jews in Suriname as well, and their colony. Now, Nassie was a Creole in the Latin American meaning Criollo. And so to define what Creole means in the Latin American meaning, that means he was a white European born in the colonies of America, to be distinguished from white Europeans born in Europe. So you're going to see within these next pages the use of the word Creole. It's not talking about an African Creole or African American Creole. This is talking about a white European born in America. The Creole here is different from Creole and Creole languages because it doesn't refer to descendants of African slaves, like I stated, but white cultures and people. In Spanish America, resistance against the privileges of Peninsula Juarez. Now, those were Europeans born in Europe. In the Iberian case, they're called Peninsula Juarez. So you have a discrepancy being made that there is a difference between whites from the Americas and contrast from whites from Europe that, born in Europe. So there's a complete difference. And so these Surinamese Jewish Creoles, they identified with Jewish and non-Jewish Surinamese born white population. They had shared experiences, problems, and thoughts. And some of these experiences that they had, according to Nassie, is that they had, in the 18th century, they had an issue where they had fewer rights and little autonomy because they are considered an inferior class to that of the inhabitants of the mother country, which in this case is in Suriname. So if you read here, I want to go over to the next page. They talk about how the Surinamese plantation owners that were Jewish, they understood that they had received damages from some of the slaves that they were having on their plantation. And so they made a distinction here that the damages were caused by, quote, bad Maroons in their attacks from the hinterland. And so Nash still giving accounts of cooperation between good Negroes and their former owners. And he also emphasizes that the Jews are as adept at plantation economies as well as Christians. He's also saying that regardless of the anti-Jewish argument saying that Christians ran their plantation better than Jews, he found out that they both ran the plantation the same. I'm getting to the point here. Nash's argument was stating that when it comes to Judaism, these Jewish masters and slaves in Suriname, the Jewish masters, Jewish slave owners treated their slaves differently. And there's rumors of that spreading. And then also there's issues, as you see here at the same time, Christian and anti-Jewish discourses are bound up with social practices of blackening. And this is where Christian slave masters are having confrontation with the Jewish slave masters in Suriname. They're having issues because again they both have different practices, and so they're having issues. And so here's where the quote comes from the previous pages here. And so the quote states that, again, from as Jonathan Discourse has argued, early modern Jews were not automatically white. The reason why is because they were having issues with the Christians. And this is but they were easily counted among black people, or they were at least considered to be of a special white but Jewish status. So this means that the Christians who ran the colonies were given this white status. They were the only ones given this white status at the time because they founded the colonies. They started the country, so they can control the social status. But when these Jews come over and they try to set up a plantation and become equals with these whites see that they practice a different belief. So they say, oh, well, we're going to put you along with black people because we don't see you as equal as us. Or you're white, but you're Jewish, so you're not quite equal as us. So there's the context to this quote, because again, if you go back to the original statement, this is the irrefutable data on the classification of the Jews. And if you just read his quote is stating that modern Jews were not white automatically, but they were counted among black people, alluding to Jews were considered black, so maybe these were black Jews. But again, if you read the if you read the book and you read the context before the actual quote, you'll see that there's an issue between Christian slave masters and Jewish slave masters. Yep. And so that's why the classification of putting them among blacks or putting them in this, quote, white but Jewish status is necessary. That's all I'd say.
And you expect a correct rebuttal to something that is absolutely cognitively dissonant. We can't formulate a rebuttal until we know you're coming with integrity.
Correct.
So we only have to use your sources that you mishandled directly in order to try to refute. But you misquoted and you parsed. And it's starting to look more, you took specific words out like Sephardic to hedge and change the whole complexity of the book. And the book wasn't primary research. It was an individual's account and commentary juxtaposed to someone else's because this was an argument.
Correct.
I'm good, man.
What else needs to be said?
This is ridiculous.
All right. Hey, Chris, if you don't have any comments, I'm going to go ahead and move on.
Please.
All right. So here I believe we have one more to go. Nope, maybe two more after this. So the claim being made here is Jewish slave trade via privateers. And
This is a good one.
Oh man.
And the source is the Jews of the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish Republic, which is interesting because as of late, we've been dealing with sources that are Portuguese, Spanish, and Suriname. So now we've gone all the way over to the Ottoman Empire and
That's
Turkey.
why I said your timeline. We all over the place with this timeline.
Right. Is how do you make that connection? Are these the same Jews? Let's hope that these are the same Jews. All right. So this is written by Stanford J. Shaw, and there's a page number there. The quote here is in the mid 16th century and after, Jews were enslaved by Christian and Muslim privateers in the Mediterranean who imprisoned them in places like Algiers, Tunis, Naples, and Candia, selling them into slavery.
Oh boy.
You guys have any comments on that?
I'm not going to say anything yet because I heard privateers. I heard a private group of people. He's all the way in the Ottoman Empire. That automatically nullifies all the other assertions prior. There's no cognition.
Okay. Chris, did you have any comments?
No cognition or synthesization with the information. Just a bunch of nonsense. Let's just get this over with.
All right. So first we're going to do the comparison between the book and his quote, and then we'll go into the actual book. So above is Jashub's quote here, and then here at the bottom is the actual quote from the book. So it says, in the mid 16th century and after, Jews were enslaved by Christian and Muslim privateers in the Mediterranean, who imprisoned them at places like Algiers, Tunis, Naples, and Candia, selling them into slavery.
Period.
But he has a period there, and the rest of the sentence there says, unless they were ransomed. Now I'm going to say
the caveat is unless. That's the caveat.
I'm going to give you the rest. I'm going to give you the rest. But it says unless they were ransomed within a certain time. So I didn't miss to cut that out. But yeah, so he did put a period after selling them into slavery. But there was more context into where that was from. And again, this is where it is in the book. In the mid 16th century and after, Jews were enslaved by Christian and Muslim privateers in Naples and in the Mediterranean, who imprisoned them in places like Algiers, Tunis, Naples, and Candia, selling them into slavery unless they were ransomed within a certain time. Do you guys have any comments on the comparison between the two quotes?
Yeah. He didn't show that it was an excerpt. He did not show it was 3 dots that should have gone there. His punctuation leads to intent of fraud. It's misleading. If you're a scholar, it's no excuse that you took something from a book that clearly didn't have a period there. So that lets me know that you lack reading comprehension of what you're reading. You're not reading critically. You're looking for confirmation bias. So you took an excerpt based on confirmation bias instead of honestly putting 3 periods saying there's more to it than this. But you wanted to have this fit your narrative of your assertion. Therefore, right. Confirmation bias. And that is a true Scotsman fallacy.
All right. Chris, you have any comments on the comparison?
To the audience, a privateer is one who owns a boat or a warship. That's all a privateer is. And why he decided to go here, I think he saw the word Jew and said, oh, Jews in slavery. I mean, it's actually despicable at what he's doing.
So let's get into the context, because the context is going to explain why privateers come up. So I'm going to go into the context here. And in the book, there's a section here that says ransoming captives and slaves. A particularly important mitzvah or good deed expected of all good Jews was the obligation to ransom Jewish captives or slaves to spare them from torture or dishonor. This tradition began in Roman times when the Jews were sent into exile from the Holy Land, many into slavery. In the 12th and 13th centuries, most Jewish slaves were those captured by marauding crusaders on their way through Central Europe to the Holy Land. In the mid 16th century and after, Jews were enslaved by Christian and Muslim privateers, and this is what the quote is, in the Mediterranean, who imprisoned them at places like Algiers, Tunis, Naples, and Candia, selling them into slavery unless they were ransomed within a certain time. But if you go back and look at the quote, this makes it seem like these Jews, which are enslaved by Christian and Muslim privateers in the mid 16th century, even though they imprisoned these Jews in these different places, they were being sold into slavery, and one could assume that the same slavery could be the transatlantic slave trade. Even though the text doesn't say that, one could assume so after looking at this entire presentation and seeing that there's black Jews being mentioned, there's black and white being disambiguated, and now there's a slave trade of Jews. You guys have any comments on the source and the context?
No.
No. Once again, he's trying to create move on, man. Like, what are we doing?
All right. So we're gonna go to the second to the last one. I believe this is the second to the last one.
Oh yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah,
right?
this is the second to the last one. All right. So next is the next claim. They came off the boat with Quranic and biblical knowledge.
Uh-oh.
Who is
What
they?
boat? Now, what boat? And who is they?
Right. That's a good question. They need to be disambiguated. Boat needs to be disambiguated. It's relative where they're from. Because again, this appeals to, well, I would think it appeals to the transatlantic slave trade. So that has to be cleared up. The source is South Carolina's Turkish People and History and Ethnology. So again, we got these Turkish people in South Carolina. All right. The author is Terry Ann Onigbene and Glenn Browder. This page number. So here's the quote. African slaves from regions of Islamic influence in the Old World, including some, here's in bold text and underlined, who were literate in the Arabic language and knowledgeable of the Quran and Bible, were imported and distributed throughout the southeastern colonies and states. And I'm not even going to get into the spelling of the Quran there. You guys have any comments on this particular claim?
That's major. You're a scholar and you're misspelling. That's major. That automatically makes me wonder.
To me, that Quran would be the Quran that was originally supported by at one point the NOI. So that's how they spell Quran.
But the problem is you can't spell it with a K in expert, but your assertion is with a Q.
Exactly.
Those are two different books, and that's why I got a problem with that. I have a serious problem with that because you didn't research, because that's cognitive dissonance. You can't have the Quran with because there is a distinctive difference between the Quran and the Quran. There's a totally different, and when we're talking about Arabic, there's a distinction between the Qaf and the Kaf. When you're speaking Luqta Arabiya, there's a big difference. But you didn't know we knew Arabic, right? Okay. Right.
At the time of this lesson we're giving here, I'm being sent messages by the gentleman. Interesting. Very slanderous, very WWF-ish. And I just have to continue to say, I will not engage in that. I just won't. I refuse.
All right. Chris, do you have any comments on the statement being made?
Once again, they came off the boat with Quranic and biblical knowledge. What was the time frame on that?
Well, we'll definitely get into that when we look at the actual source here. But I'll go over to the next page. So here is at the top, Jashub's quote, and then here's actually the quote side by side. Now, the quote starts in the middle of a sentence. Again, this is behavior that we're seeing. So it says African slaves from the regions of Islamic influence in the old world, including some who were literate in the Arabic language and knowledgeable of the Quran and Bible.
Stop. For keyword there is from regions of Islamic influence.
Correct.
So of course, they would have knowledge of the Quran and the Torah, Mishnah probably, and Mishnah. So what are we proving there? Continue on.
Yep. Let's
And
continue.
let me make this clear. We
Sure.
see, as Melvin is showing, we see the word many. And as Melvin inferred, this is a part of a sentence of a phrase. So you parsed the phrase, which means you altered the context. And this is a proper noun. It's not just saying it would, or they wouldn't have capitalized the word African. They're actually giving proper noun, proper distinction to a type of slaves, meaning there were different types of slaves. And these were African slaves, so they had to give it a proper noun as they go into the word from, which is the linking verb to regions. So if you don't know grammar, when I parse this, I'm going to make you think something totally different than what it was originally intended to be. Grammar is important. Google scholars think they just got to go get an excerpt. No, you actually have to know grammar. You're so busy worrying about being Hebrew and learning Hebrew. How about learning English? Maybe you can get halfway there.
All right. So I want to finish the quote here. So it talks about knowledge of the Quran and Bible were imported and distributed throughout the southeastern colonies and states. But you see that's a semicolon there. So that means that the author is continuing to add context to what's being said. I'm going to show you it in full context. But as you can see, there's a crime being committed here from the presenter being Jashub here. So here's the actual quote. So first, this here side is context. We're going to get into that in a second, but I'm going to show you the actual quote on the right-hand side so you can understand where it's coming from. So the sentence actually starts with readers also should keep in mind that many African slaves from the regions of Islamic influence in the Old World, including some who were literate in the Arabic language and knowledgeable of the Quran and Bible, were imported and distributed throughout the southeastern colonies and states. And remnants. Hold on. I want to finish to the period. And remnants of Islamic culture can still be detected in communities along the Carolina coast. Go ahead.
Notice what it says. His assertion was slaves had biblical and Quranic knowledge, but he never told you why they had it.
Correct.
They had it because the area of the old world, they were still teaching certain things. So what were you inferring when you made that assertion? Were you, because many of us, many of the arguments in the conscious community is, where was the Bible at on the slave boats? Where was the Bible at on the slave boats? We hear that. So is this why you used it? But the reason why they would know of such things is because they come from areas of the old world that clearly had knowledge of the Quran and the Bible. It's just that simple.
Correct.
Go ahead.
No, I just want to get into the context here. Now, boat isn't mentioned here. Let me know if it is. But I want to go into the reading so you understand who they're talking about. So starting on the left, available reports also demonstrated that a few Muslims lived in South Carolina, and an occasional Moorish visitor appeared in the area in the 18th and 19th centuries. For example, according to historian James Hagee, certain exotic ethnics showed up in South Carolina and created quite a stir in 1786. His book, Muslim Slaves, which is a good read as well. Here's a quote, 2 men appeared in Charleston dressed in the Moorish habit and aroused a great deal of suspicion by their strange ways, end quote. They were taken to the home of an Arabic-speaking woman who was born in the Barbary States and resided in Charleston. They explained to her that they had sailed from Algeria to Virginia, where they were arrested as suspected Algerines, and they somehow made their way overland to South Carolina. To summarize these sources, Muslims and Moors, undoubtedly including Turkish individuals, helped explore and settle North America. Some sided with the American struggle for independence, and a few lived in or visited South Carolina during its early history. And so what they're talking about is these Muslims and Moorish people. So when you have Muslims and in this case Moorish people, you know that they understand the readings of the Quran, and they oftentimes also have an understanding of the Bible itself, or in its text, in its context, the Torah. So that's not necessarily something that is shocking. We also know that, you know what I'm saying, that's something that's part of their society for them to understand these writings. But again, going back to the original assertion here that's being made, they came off the boat with Quranic and biblical knowledge, but it hasn't disambiguated who they were. So, like I said, one could assume he's talking about the transatlantic slave trade, and that those Africans knew about the Quran and the Bible. Any comments on the context?
No, none at this time. Not now. Maybe later.
Okay, Chris.
Nothing.
All right. So we're gonna get to the last one. We could do more, but it's very, as you can see, it's very time consuming. But we'll definitely present more if necessary. The last one here: a return to the ancestral identity. So the source here is Black Jews in Africa and the Americas. So the quote is, following the Battle of Adwa, a number of Black churches in the United States started developing the literalist notion that the Israelites of old were Black African. One such was a church founded in Wrightsville, a small rural village south of Little Rock, Arkansas, by William Christian. And it's in bold here, who was born into slavery in Mississippi in 1856. His message was essentially that Adam, King David, and King Solomon, Job, Jeremiah, Moses' wife, the Queen of Sheba, and Jesus Christ were all Black. Any comments on the claim here being made?
Go ahead, Chris.
How are you linking your identity to mythological characters? Nothing here. I mean, let's get into it. Kansu?
No. I see Black theology. That's what I see.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. All right. So let's go into the actual side by side. So side by side, this is from the actual book, and I actually have it highlighted so it's easy for you guys to see. So on the right, it looks like everything is the same. Following the Battle of Adwa, a number of Black churches in the United States started developing the literalist notion that the Israelites of old were Black Africans. Okay, so that's a punctuation issue, a grammatical issue, actually. The word Africans is there. It's an S. He has a Black African. So we have to fix that. And also, who had started on Ethiopia period is missing. He added a period after Black African. So he took the S off and the rest of the sentence and took that off. So that's missing because they started out in Ethiopia. So that's a big issue there.
Yes, because if you take out Ethiopia, now it makes the argument that Jews came over in the boat very hard to believe that people migrated from Ethiopia instead of the Levant into West Africa. Ethiopian people are populated by Kush people, and Ethiopia was also encumbered into Kenya, which now has a political argument that they were separate at this moment. And you had all kind of people that were considered Ethiopia. In the earlier text of those people of those archaic times, from Egypt all the way south, it was called Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, yep, by Greeks.
So
yep.
that to take that out shows intent to be able to alter a historical timeline that's been established and hasn't been debunked, because it's more than a notion that you would probably take the mouse, grab some of the S, and delete the rest of Ethiopia. And so that's kind of suggestive right there, Jashub. That doesn't make any sense, but you're making the contention that they came over on the boat in the assertion prior to. So this shows a pathology of you trying to deceive. You're trying to shoehorn a narrative that they were these Africans right here, when these Africans right here clearly were of Ethiopian nature.
Mm-hmm.
Which means you're going to have to further understand Ethiopia, emptying into the Levant, and then emptying through Northern Africa, going through Mauritania, and then eventually coming through on a boat.
Game over.
All the way here. But you didn't want to do that, so you thought you just erased a quick 2,000 years of history by removing Ethiopia.
Whew. All right. So the rest of the quote is fine. Everything from one such was a church found in Wrightsville. All of that is correct and matched on the on the left. But that black Africans instead of black African, that's definitely a crime there. And then who has started out in Ethiopia, that needs to be put back. Let's go into the actual context of the quote. So the quote again is highlighted in blue. But we're going to actually look into what the author is talking about here. So starting on the left, the importance of Ethiopia as a symbol of black pride was emphasized in 1896 with the success of black Ethiopian troops against the European colonial power at the Battle of Adwa, where the Ethiopians massacred the heavily outnumbered Italians. This is the first time that an African country has successfully resisted a serious European attempt to invade it. The Ethiopian historian Baru Zedwe noted that few events in modern period have brought Ethiopia to the attention of the world as has the victory at Adwa. The racial dimension which what lent Adwa particularly significance is the victory of blacks over whites. That's a quote. The impact of the Battle of Adwa, quote, was to heighten the mysterious impression Ethiopia conveyed to Afro-Americans as well as to the outside world. And it conjured up the symbol of Ethiopia as the Zion in Africa in the minds of vast numbers of Afro-Americans as well as Africans living under colonial rule, end quote. So here's where the quote actually begins. Following the Battle of Adwa, the number of black churches in the United States started developing the literalist notion that the Israelites of old were black Africans who had started out in Ethiopia.
Wait a minute. So this isn't even a primary.
No, sir.
This is just ideology.
Correct.
Oh, shit. Wow.
So then,
hold on. Let me show you my shocked face. What? Oh, really? He been doing it all night. And these are the type of sources that these guys present into the conscious community, literally rendering you unconscious. This is what you call ambush scholarship. This is why guys don't like presenting their sources before a debate. I'm sorry, Melvin.
No, you did your thing.
Go ahead.
I'm glad you said it was ideology, because when you look at the quote in context, the next step, the next part is going to really add to that ideology that you speak of, because it says one such was a church founded in Wrightsville, a small rural village south of Little Rock, Arkansas, by William Christian, who was born into slavery in Mississippi in 1856. And his message was essentially that Adam, King David, and King Solomon,
he
Job,
took that out. He
Maya,
took all of that out.
The Queen of Sheba, and Jesus Christ were all black. So he has that here, but he's missing Ethiopia, and he's also missing the context of why Ethiopia is important to what's being said, because they're talking about Ethiopia's significance as being a country that dominated whites at the time in the Battle of Adwa. And the influence is to use Ethiopia as a Zion in Africa to both Afro Americans in the United States as well as other Africans living in colonial rule.
So you mean to tell me we're still pushing these ideologies of praising King David, but saying, hey, you know what? Forget King Menelik II, who defeated the Italians.
Again, this is a small church.
Well, I think this author is being genuine to the historical data.
Correct.
When we talk about Ethiopia, we're talking about the Coptic Church. We're talking about the Christian Coptic Church.
Correct.
And the battle between the Christians against the Semites, the anti-Jews against those that were Jew, which ultimately, if you understand history, led to the Protestants, the Protestants. They protested against the marrying of the Roman and Catholic Church. And then when we go down, we see that they talk about the churches of holiness and Freemasonry.
Yep.
That is intertwined into this, which shows Americana.
Correct.
Okay. It doesn't show original Judean practice. It shows the Americana, Afro-Americans. They were deeply American because they started to outnumber the continental African, and they started adopting Americana practices. This is why people like Rabbi Ford and all those guys started operating as the Americana of the Judean tradition, just like the Nation of Islam is the Americana of Orthodox Islam. It's a faction. It's not the definite article.
Right. And if you keep reading Kasu, it talks about his racialized theology used the same exegetical mechanism as the Anglo-Israelites. He simply replaced whites with blacks, and his church had been termed the first black supremacy organization in the United States. And then it also follows up with some respectable names. In 1914, Bishop John A. Hickerson, and who also went by the names Father Divine and Reverend Bishop St. John Divine, and others, founded the Church of the Living God, the pillar in the ground of truth in Harlem, identified himself completely as an Ethiopian, and taught a variation of New Thought, the spiritual movement that had started in the 1830s in England and the United States. That, ladies and gentlemen, is context that you would never get if you're just looking at the scope. Which was parsed, by the way.
Which was parsed, by the way. Let me do my surprise face again. What? Really?
All right, I'm going to stop screen sharing here. That is the end of the presentation. What do you guys think about the entire presentation altogether?
I thought it showed a lot of disingenuousness. I thought he was trying to push a narrative that was not really there. I saw lack of cognition. I saw lack of synthesization within the information. I saw lack of synchronization. I saw lack of understanding. I saw lying. I saw every deliberate fallacy that you can find while I'm still receiving 1,000 texts from this gentleman, which I'll be showing on my platform, or there. Everything that you want to accuse us of doing is being pseudo, being deplorables, being liars, is what you have done in this entire presentation. I mean, what are you going to say next? Oh, that's because I got the older version of the book. What are you going to try and do? Move the goalposts and say they didn't explain it this way and that way inside of your echo chambers? Why everybody puts a battery in your back? I'm going to have to say this, and I know Kansu does not want me to do this. You're not even worth discussing these matters with. And if we do decide to discuss them with you, we're only going to be discussing this presentation. There is no debate needed between me and you and Kansu, you and Melvin, or anyone else in Team Osiris. We are the teachers, you are the students. We create men, champions, and we exude excellence and breed intelligence. That's what this is all about. This is not a WWF event. This is not about slander. This is about showing the flaws in your presentation. That's all I got to say. What? No.
All right, let me add some commentary real quick, and then Kasi, you can take it and also close out. So first of all, Chris, for him to say it's an older version of the book, he would have needed to put that in the actual presentation. If he used a first edition or a different version, a revised edition, he would need to have put that in the slides, because none of those sources had a different version that I know of. And if such was the case, he would have need to have properly cited the source to begin with. So we're not even going to go down the rabbit holes with that. But I do say here, you do see a pattern. At first you would think, okay, maybe it's accidental, maybe it's not intentional, but then you see the same pattern a lot of times in the same book. So you have to question, okay, what is the intent of the presenter? Are they trying to insinuate something that the author clearly did not make? Or are they just being purely disingenuous intentionally? And I think that's the case here. It's just that he's trying to present a message, but his process, his method for going by it is not something that is scholastically honorable. So if we were to have a debate or a discussion, he first would need to fix the issues within the presentation. There are more, I guarantee it. The PowerPoint was about 150 slides. There are more. Some I chose not to go into because it would make this discussion a 2-hour discussion. So I decided to leave some things out, but this is a behavior issue. This is pattern. This is consciously knowing that you're doing something that is wrong and not caring. So that's something that needs to be corrected. And in college, you get kicked out. You lose all your points, your points to go to the next, go to another college and redeem those points. If you have a degree, a lot of times your degrees are nullified. Your reputation is damaged if this was college. Fortunately, it's the conscious community. And as Team Osiris, we definitely make sure that those in the conscious community remain intellectually honest. So that's a checkmate. Go ahead, Kansu.
Yeah. I don't have to reiterate much. I just think that in these particular paradigms, in these little bubbles of consciousness, we have a behavioral issue here. We have an issue that's a bit cultistic, and it's dysfunctional cultism. Cultism is an old term. You have cults all the way back to Kemet. They talk about cults and fetishes. But this is abnormal. It shows sociopathic and pathological issues with lack of cognition for understanding what you're reading. And you expect someone to debate this as if you were a peer. We can't debate a peer. Now, we can teach one, and then when you become a peer, we can debate you. But we can't debate something that has no scope. This has no scope. It does not carry any intent to validate an argument. What it is a smear campaign, and you put together it's a sloppy job. I don't know if you were lazy. I don't know if you were rushed, if you didn't have time. Who knows? But what I do know is these things are inexcusable. There's no excuse for someone who calls themselves a scholastic bully, which is an oxymoron, by the way. You don't bully people with scholarship. It's a scientific practice. Scholars believe in the scientific method of discovery. So they don't believe in bullying anybody, which is, it kind of shows why you are a bully, because you're using ambush scholarship and you're parsing things to validate a false narrative. And you're not even true to your own particular culture. You're not even true to your own culture. You're parsing that to justify a wide, drawn out ideology. You're not even being honest to yourself. So, you know, with that being said, I just, as a collective group of people, we can't address ignorance. We can educate ignorance if you're humble enough to take it. But this was a horrible presentation with no scope and no point. No point at all. Brother Chris, you want to close this out, man?
Yeah, what I'm going to do once again, and I understand, let me get my mic on here. One of the things I told Kansu was like, yo, I'm tired of everybody bothering me with this stuff. And Kansu said, welcome to the big leagues. There's a target on you. They're going to come after you. If this was a debate, since I'm probably an active debater with Team Osiris, I would have finished this off in 2 minutes. This would have been an open and shut case in the first round, as Kansu like to say. I'm not interested in debating you until first you fix your presentation. The WWF antics, the name calling, the slander, the attention seeking, things that you do, and I'm not going to bring Brother Yeremiah into this because he doesn't do that. I honestly think you guys hold him back, and that's my honest assessment. I'm not interested in debating you. There's still more information that I'll be bringing forth on my channel concerning the Spanish Portuguese Jews and the context of what these semi-parsed paragraphs that you put in your presentation were truly about. I am a historian. I love history. And I think your timeline was all over the place. I mean, you even went as far back as the Ottoman slave trade. I was super confused. I think all of us were when we saw that presentation. And according to your Torah, it says convict somebody on 2 witnesses, on the mouth of 2 witnesses. And you spoke against yourself almost 10 times. And we can't say that enough. I mean, if this was the last 48 hours, you would be convicted in the first 2. I mean, I don't know what to say and how to approach these things. And I'm being very calm. I'm in a joking mood. I've received over 20 text messages from you. And I told you that we were doing the presentation, and I will consult with Brother Consul and say, hey, I want this video uploaded here, here, and here also. I want everybody to see this. I want everybody to see that you are nothing to fear, that you are in fact disingenuous and you are a liar. If this was a university, you would be kicked out. They would not even expel you. The professor will walk away. He would go to the office, speak to the counselor, and he would say, don't come in my class anymore. It's not fair. It's not fair to the conscious community. It's not fair to the Christians that you guys constantly debate. And it's not fair to the people that you try to debate. It's not fair to Consul. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to Melvin Jefferson. But I had fun doing this. As always, I learned a lot by doing this. I don't have to get all WWF with you all anymore or act all silly and beat my chest behind the safety of the internet. I don't have to do that. This is about scholarship, not scholarship. And I want to close out with that.
Peace, power. Love to everybody. This has been a Team Osiris production. We appreciate your time and effort. We're going to continue to produce credible information. 10+ years going. Folks have tried to attack our personalities, but never the information. Our information has never been attacked. And we've been consistently the bosses of this. So with that being said, we'll talk to you guys soon. Be peaceful.
Turn into the next show on Chris and VP Harris. Peace.